Hello and welcome to this video. My name's Barry Beckham. Audio-visual is all about the presentation of images, but there's a fine line between creating something neat and something crass. As we come up with audio-visual ideas to put into our slideshow, we're actually walking along that fine line. And it's very easy for us to slip either way, and I think that's true for the experienced and also the less experienced. One way to ensure that we do stay on the right side of that line is to be patient. If we create our show but don't publish it, we just live with it ourselves. We play it to ourselves once a day for a month. You're likely to see your own show very differently the day you created it compared to a month later when you've viewed it 30 times or more. If you completed a slideshow on Monday and you watch it a couple of times a day until Friday and you're not making changes by then, you're either a genius or you're not even seeing the problems in your show. You choose which one is most likely. Audio-visual is all about making a good first impression. Capture your audience and try to keep them watching for the few minutes of their time that you need. Of all the natural atmospheric effects we try to recreate in our audio-visual, I think moving clouds seems to me to be one of the better ones. It's not going to be perfect though, because we cannot use still images to create what we can only see with a speeded up video. In a recent audio-visual which I called the Storm Season, I used moving clouds to open the sequence and present the title. I showed it recently to an experienced professional photographer who immediately assumed that he was viewing video. It's not video, of course, it's simple still images. So perhaps this technique is worth demonstrating, but we do need to use Photoshop's selections and layers. The good news is the technique is not a lengthy one or a complicated one. The slideshow size was created at Full HD 1920x1080, but the images used were sized to 2560 pixels by 1440, which retains the 16:9 aspect ratio, but just allows a little extra size for the animation. And here we're viewing the 4 images I used in Photoshop's Bridge. Now I think from memory I did use 4 images as the start of my sequence, but the technique we're going to use is exactly the same for all 4. So it doesn't really matter which one of these images I select, but we'll select the first one. I'll double click to open this up into Photoshop, and one of the first things I need to do is to decide which part of the cloud I need to cut out, because that's what I'm going to do. Just make a simple selection, soften the edge of the selection and make a copy. I'm going to leave my original clouds untouched. For this task I think I'll stay with the lasso tool, the one I usually call freehand, although it's not called freehand up here, it's just called lasso, but I call it freehand because we can just draw freehand with it. Control D will remove it, of course. I think when I produced this sequence I made a quick selection around the cloud here, something along these lines. And once I'd made the selection I need to soften the edge of that line. In modern Photoshop we do that with a tool at the top of the screen called Select and Mask. Now if you don't have a selection tool selected from the toolbox, then you won't see this option, of course. So let's click to open it up and we'll take a look at what we have. If you come with me over to the top right of the screen, we have what we call the view mode. Now for our purposes here, we're looking at the image as just a black and white, and there you can see it. We can view it on white, we can view it on black, we can have an overlay, lots of different ways to view this, but for what we're going to do here, black and white is going to meet our needs. Now we can see that the edge of the line is pretty sharp, so we can forget most of these sliders here, we just need the feather. So I'm going to move it to the right until I think I've got enough feather or enough softness in that selection. And this isn't cast in stone. Don't worry too much if you get this a little bit wrong, because it's easy to come back and have another go. Let's settle on around 55, let's say 50, between 50 and 60 pixels. And the output section down here, I'm going to output it back to a selection. So all I've done is soften the edge. Now I need to copy what's within that selection to a new layer. Now that's really easy in Photoshop, Control J, but what we're effectively doing is what we do in many other pieces of software too, edit copy and edit paste. And we'll do that from the top left of the screen in the menus, but Control J is so simple, we'll just do that on this occasion. If I go over to my layers and turn off the base layer, you can see the soft cloud that I've created. Now let's make the assumption here, let me turn that one off and this one on. Let's make the assumption that we've already saved this into our slideshow folder, the project that we're making. So what we need to do now is to follow that up by copying just the selection and the cutout that we've made here. And we need to save that as a PNG file because we need the transparent nature of the outer edge here retained. So let's go to File, Save As from the top left of the screen. From the options in the Save As type, we need to choose PNG to retain that transparent background. I'm going to give this a name. I think I'll just put -edit. I'm going to click Save. I'm going to use medium file size. That's usually my standard. Click OK. And we're done. Now as you can see by the spinning round of the screen, I've opened up Pictures to XE9 and I've navigated to my folder which I called Animating Clouds. So you can see the first 4 images that I used in my sequence. We only really need BD01, and there we can see the PNG file that we created a few moments ago. I've got Pictures to XE open in the timeline and I've got a blank selected. So all we need to do to look at this technique is to bring down the first image, and with that image in place I'm going to go into my Objects and Animation screen. I'm going to lose the bounding box here, just click into the grey area. I'm going to add an image with the icon at the top left, and of course the image I need, I've got to first navigate to where I'm working. A little bit of a journey to this, so please bear with me just for a moment. Once we go there once, of course, the next time it'll go there automatically. There's my PNG. I can double click to select it. Now although we can see it has appeared over on the right hand side, of course we can't see it on the image because it's sitting directly over the image it was originally removed from. Now you can see that I've made a small change down in the timeline here. I've just moved my first cloud up closer to the blank to start, and at the moment of course I'm not sure exactly when the next slide needs to be because we're working without any sound here. But we don't need sound for the demonstration, so what I've done is just made a calculated guess at how long I need for when this image appears on screen, how many seconds we need for the animation to take place, and then of course that animation will end when the next image replaces it. And what we need to remember of course is the speed of the animated object, and the object in our case is the clouds on this image, is determined by how much movement I'm about to place within the keyframes, which we have yet to do, and the gap between this image and this image. So let's select our cloudscape once again and go back into the Objects and Animation screen, and with the PNG file selected we see the first of the keyframes selected for us. Now I want my animation to be starting the moment the image appears on screen, so I'm quite happy for my first keyframe to be hard on the left hand side, and in actual fact I want my next one to be on the right hand side. So I'm going to right click this one and clone the keyframe, and I'm going to drag it up and drop it into position. Now the animation of our PNG cloud is pretty simple. I can just drag out the corner toggle with the cursor, or one of my favorite methods is to just go up to the zoom here, hover my mouse over the X and just drag to the left or the right depending which way I want it to go. And there's the animation I want to apply. Now of course we're going to make changes to this very slightly when we go back out and we start to see the slideshow with the music. But just for the moment, let me put my cursor back at the start, and in the mini player, let me get the mini player as big as I can. I'll press play and we'll just watch what we have at the moment. Now all I've done with the piece of cloud I cut out is to zoom it, but of course I could pan it up, down, left, right, as well as zooming if I wish. Now the speed of that moving cloud is going to be partly personal but partly determined by the music you choose. Here it's moving a bit slow for my tastes, but then again I've got a memory of the original slideshow where I think the music sort of suggested that the animation was a bit faster. But of course we can speed the animation up by just closing the gap between the two images, because perhaps my guesstimate is a little wide. So let's pick up this image and drop it a few seconds closer to this one, put the cursor back at the start, and we'll have another look, because now the animation is going to be moving marginally faster because we've given it less time to do its work. And of course it will look much better when we hear the music, and in my case sound effects too. So the technique is pretty simple to do. Make a selection, soften the edge, copy it and save it as a PNG file. So if you take a look at the image that's currently in the mini player, there's a number of things we could do with that. Because we're not restricted to just one animation, we could cut 2 or 3 sections of cloud from the image we're viewing in the player here. We could make a selection around that top black cloud that's up at the top right, and also the one down at the bottom left. We could have them slightly zooming but also slightly moving into the image, so we add a little bit of pan as well, while the center portion either remains stationary or maybe that zooms a little bit too. It all takes just a little bit of experimentation to get that flow and feel right, but once we do, I think it adds quite an interesting start to an audio visual. And of course it does give us the opportunity to present the title as well. Now this technique has quite a degree of flexibility, as I'm sure you've noticed, because we can determine the softness of the selection we make in Photoshop, which is going to affect the visual output. We can choose how much of the clouds we're going to animate, how fast we're going to animate them, and over what time. And that's part of the fun of making audio visual. I hope you've enjoyed this video and it has given you food for thought, but then again you have reached the end, so I must assume you did. And now's the time for me to put out an advert, so if you want to hit the escape key and avoid that, do so now. I've just completed the recording of a completely new set of HD videos on the subject of Photoshop for photographers and also understanding layers. As you're aware, software never stands still. It's always being updated and improved. Pictures to Exe is one example, Photoshop is another. So any videos that are teaching the subject have to be created on an up-to-date version with all the latest tools, tips and techniques. Photoshop for photographers is made up of 58 videos in 6 sections you can download. Photoshop for photographers can be thought of as a complete image editing course, but it doesn't have to be. It's laid out in a logical learning order with numbered videos. All you need to do is start at number 1 and follow the numbers. You go as far into the program as you wish. And for those who decide to buy all 6 parts of my Photoshop for photographers, I'm going to add a complete range of Lightroom videos too. After all, soon after Photoshop CC was created, Photoshop added Lightroom as a free bonus. I'm going to do exactly the same with Photoshop for photographers. To view the introduction video to Photoshop for photographers, come along to my website at the address on screen. There is another reason that you may want to visit. Photoshop for photographers is actually made up of 7 parts. The first part, containing 14 videos running for well over 2 hours, is completely free for you to download. So take a look at exactly what you're going to get before you make any decision. Thank you for watching, and don't forget you can find me on Flickr, my YouTube channel, and you can even come along to my website and join a photographic and audio-visual forum.